Growing up in 1970s Britain meant living under a strict code of household rules that weren't up for debate. These weren't gentle suggestions, they were non-negotiable commands shaped by economic hardship, fuel crises, water shortages, and deeply ingrained ideas about discipline and respect. Every rule had a reason, usually tied to survival, thrift, or maintaining order in overcrowded homes where resources were scarce and patience even scarcer. If you were a child in that decade, you learned quickly: obey without question, conserve everything, and never ever challenge authority. These 15 rules defined daily life and left a lasting imprint on everyone who grew up under their watch. The central heating thermostat, usually mounted conspicuously in the hall or living room, was treated like a sacred relic that only parents were allowed to approach. This rule was enforced ruthlessly due to soaring fuel costs following the 1973 oil crisis, which made heating shockingly expensive and every degree a financial gamble. Parents checked the dial constantly, adjusting it with care and suspicion, while children were absolutely forbidden from even thinking about touching it. Any attempt to nudge the temperature up, even by a single degree, would be met with the furious rhetorical question: do you have any idea how much even a few degrees can impact the gas bill? The thermostat became a symbol of parental control and household economy, a physical boundary that represented the constant tension between comfort and survival. You learned to layer jumpers, wear your coat indoors, and accept that warmth was rationed, not a right in a home where every penny counted and the heating dial was off limits. Mandatory blackouts, enforced by the government during the 1974 three-day week to conserve energy, plunged entire neighbourhoods into darkness without warning, forcing families to adapt to life without electricity. When the power went out, the family would gather around a single flickering candle or paraffin lamp for light, the television silent and useless in the corner. Children were expected to sit still and quietly, with no complaints, no noise, and absolutely no wandering around in the dark. There was nothing to do, no entertainment, no distractions, just enforced stillness and silence while parents waited for the power to return. What sticks most vividly is the profound, suffocating boredom of being forced into silence when the electricity failed, sitting in near darkness with nothing but shadows and whispers to pass the time. The blackouts weren't just inconvenient, they were a harsh reminder of how fragile modern life was, and how quickly comfort could be stripped away by forces beyond anyone's control. Sharing bathwater was an absolute non-negotiable rule in most households, driven by the desperate need to conserve expensive heated water and fuel during a time when both were luxuries. The routine was strict and hierarchical. Adults bathed first, followed by siblings in descending age order, with the youngest child always getting the worst deal at the end of the chain. By the time the last child climbed in, the bathwater was notably colder, murky green, and heavily soiled with soap scum and grime from everyone who'd gone before. There was no escape, no private bath, no fresh water, just the resigned acceptance that this was how it had to be to maximise every drop and every unit of gas. What everyone remembers most vividly is being the youngest subjected to the coldest, dirtiest water, the symbolic and literal end of resource maximisation. It wasn't comfortable, it wasn't pleasant, but it was the reality of survival in a home where heating water was an expensive event, not a daily right. During the extreme drought of 1976, water conservation became a mandated public duty, and families were instructed to reuse every drop possible, including bathwater, to avoid wasting precious resources. Buckets or saucepans of grey soapy water sat by the bath, waiting to be repurposed for flushing the toilet, a labour-intensive chore that fell to whoever was unlucky enough to be tasked with it. Manually dumping bathwater into the toilet bowl To flush the cistern was messy, awkward, and unpleasant, but it was the expectation, and failure to comply could mean a visit from busybody neighbours who might report misuse of hosepipes or excess watering to the authorities. The fear of being reported, the visible shame of wasting water, and the constant surveillance from neighbours created an atmosphere of enforced thrift and communal policing. What sticks most powerfully is the smell and sight of cold grey water sloshing in buckets, a daily reminder of scarcity, rationing, and the relentless pressure to make every resource last. Dishes were washed in a basin or plugged sink filled once and used repeatedly, because running hot water continuously was an unthinkable waste of expensive fuel needed to heat it. The sink or bowl would fill up with cold, greasy, and heavily soiled water as plates, cutlery, and pots were scrubbed one after another, with no fresh rinse and no second chance. Parents prioritised thrift and resource conservation over modern hygiene standards, insisting that one basin of water was enough to clean an entire meal's worth of dishes, no matter how dirty or cloudy it became. What everyone remembers most vividly is the smell, the cold, oily, food-scented stench of soiled dishwater that sat stagnant while you worked through the pile, and the greasy film that clung to your hands afterwards. It wasn't pleasant, it wasn't hygienic by today's standards, but it was the reality of making every drop of heated water count in a home where the gas meter ruled every domestic decision. This persistent Victorian-era rule demanded that children be physically present during family gatherings or adult conversations, but completely silent and unobtrusive, existing as passive observers rather than active participants. Children learned quickly to sit still and quiet on the sofa, hands folded, while adults spoke, laughed, and debated, knowing that any interruption would be met with sharp rebuke or a cold, silencing glare. You were expected to wait patiently for your turn to speak, a turn that, in reality, often never came, leaving your thoughts and questions bottled up and ignored. What sticks most powerfully is the creeping feeling that your thoughts, feelings, and opinions simply weren't important if they disrupted adult peace or convenience. The rule reinforced a rigid hierarchy where children existed at the bottom, valued for obedience and invisibility rather than voice or individuality, creating a silence that was heavy, stifling, and impossible to break without consequences. The act of questioning, challenging, or even politely disagreeing with a parent was viewed as severe insubordination, an offence that warranted swift and often harsh punishment. The moment a child dared to utter a challenge or backtalk to an exhausted, stressed parent, you could see the look of fear and regret flash across their face as they realised the mistake they'd made. Any attempt at argument was immediately shut down with authoritative, conversation-ending phrases like, "Because I said so," leaving no room for explanation, negotiation, or understanding. What everyone remembers most vividly is the rhetorical, ultimate threat that hung in the air like a dark cloud. "I brought you into this world, I can take you out." It was said with enough seriousness to make you believe it. A chilling reminder that parental authority was absolute, unchallengeable, and backed by the threat of consequences you didn't want to test. Answering back wasn't just rude, it was dangerous, a line you learned never to cross if you valued peace and safety. This traditional etiquette rule, dating back to medieval times, was enforced rigidly as a marker of good manners, respectability, and proper upbringing, even in homes where other standards had long since slipped. The dining table was a place of sharp parental surveillance, where posture, behaviour, and decorum were monitored with hawk-like attention, and any lapse was corrected instantly. Parents would abruptly command, "Elbows off the table," with no explanation beyond "it's rude," leaving children confused about why this particular rule mattered so much when other loud or rude behaviours were sometimes ignored. What sticks most powerfully is the strange, uncomfortable contrast of being forced to maintain perfect table manners, sitting upright, elbows tucked, cutlery held correctly, while the rest of family life felt chaotic, loud, and far from refined. The rule felt arbitrary, outdated, and disconnected from reality, yet it was enforced with absolute consistency, a small battle for control and respectability in a world where both were constantly under threat. Door slamming was considered an audible act of defiance, disrespect, or loss of self-control, and it led to swift, often explosive retribution from parents who interpreted the noise as a personal attack on their authority. The door frame, often with a hinge needing repair after years of daily use and occasional abuse, stood as a silent witness to the tension and frustration that built up in overcrowded homes where privacy was scarce and tempers were short. Children were expected to control their emotional volume, closing doors gently and quietly to maintain domestic calm, even when anger, frustration, or hurt made you want to slam it with all your strength. What everyone remembers most is the sudden, sharp crack of a slammed door echoing through the house, instantly ending any hope of peace for the adults and guaranteeing that punishment would follow swiftly. The rule wasn't just about protecting the hinges, it was about enforcing emotional control, teaching children to suppress their feelings and keep their anger silent, invisible, and contained, no matter how justified it felt. This universal rule was designed to protect expensive, fragile, or complicated household possessions, like delicate ornaments and new technology, from the curious, clumsy hands of children who couldn't be trusted not to break them. Delicate ceramic figurines, such as shepherdesses or prized Hummel collectibles, were placed high on the mantelpiece or shelf, deliberately out of reach, visible but completely untouchable. Children learned quickly that they were spectators of family property, not operators, especially when it came to the single television set, the stereo, or any other piece of expensive equipment that parents guarded jealously. What sticks most vividly is the intense, suppressed curiosity about expensive gadgets and fragile objects that sat tantalizingly close, but were surrounded by invisible barriers of threat and prohibition. You could look, you could admire, but you could never touch, never explore, never satisfy the natural childhood urge to understand how things worked or what they felt like, creating a frustrating distance between you and the objects that filled your home. The front door was reserved exclusively for guests, special occasions like Christmas, or formal visits, while the family was expected to use the back or side entrance for all everyday comings and goings. This rigid rule existed to protect the pristine front hall carpet, which had to remain spotless and untouched by the dirt, mud, and grime that children invariably tracked in from outdoor play. Children were yelled at loudly and immediately for daring to use the front door, a mistake that signalled ignorance of the household hierarchy and disrespect for the family's carefully maintained public image. What sticks most powerfully is the strange, glaring contrast between the home's formal, public face, polished, clean, and welcoming to outsiders, and the family's utilitarian back entrance, muddy, functional, and marked by discarded boots and everyday chaos. The front door wasn't just an entrance, it was a symbolic barrier between the respectable image the family presented to the world and the messy, lived-in reality of daily life behind closed doors. The best room, or parlour, was strictly reserved for guests, significant holidays, or rare family emergencies, and was completely off-limits to children for everyday use. Inside, expensive furniture sat stiff and uncomfortable, often wrapped in protective plastic covers that crinkled when touched, preserved like museum exhibits for occasions that rarely came. This room housed the family's finest, most fragile ornaments, pristine cushions, and decorative items that were symbolic markers of social status and respectability, not objects meant for actual living. What everyone remembers most vividly is the strange musty smell that greeted you when the door was finally opened. The scent of a room that was rarely aired, rarely used, and left to sit in stale, silent preservation for months at a time. The good room wasn't a living space, it was a shrine to aspirations and appearances, a physical representation of the gap between the life the family wanted others to see and the cramped, chaotic reality they actually lived in. A widespread custom demanded the immediate removal of shoes upon entry to protect expensive fitted carpets from dirt, mud, and contamination. A rule enforced with military precision by parents who'd invested heavily in their carpeting. The functional back entrance became a designated dumping ground for discarded boots and Wellington boots, piled in muddy heaps, creating a visual and olfactory marker of the boundary between the dirty outdoor world and the clean, protected interior. Failure to comply with this rule prompted the sharp rhetorical question, were you born in a barn? A shaming device designed to make children feel uncivilized and thoughtless for forgetting. What sticks most powerfully is the ritualistic separation of the messy outdoor world from the clean, carpeted sanctuary inside. A physical and psychological boundary that reinforced the idea that the home was a fragile space under constant threat from outside dirt and disorder. The act of removing shoes wasn't just practical, it was a daily reminder that comfort and cleanliness came with strict conditions, and that the family's investment in respectability had to be protected at all costs. A non-negotiable zero-waste policy rooted deeply in the lingering memory of wartime rationing and the financial pressures of high inflation forced children to consume every last scrap of food placed in front of them. The sight is unforgettable, a child staring miserably at the last bits of overcooked vegetables, congealed gravy, or gristly meat remaining on the plate, knowing that leaving the table was impossible until it was all gone. Parents viewed wasted food as ingratitude, disrespect, and moral failure, enforcing consumption with phrases like, "Think of the starving children," and "We paid good money for that," creating guilt and obligation around every meal. What everyone remembers most is having to override fullness cues, forcing down food that made you gag or feel sick, instilling lasting, complicated relationships with eating and hunger that persisted long into adulthood. The rule wasn't just about food, it was about control, discipline, and the deep anxiety of scarcity that shaped every aspect of household management in an era where nothing could be taken for granted. Most homes had only one wired landline telephone, and calls were metered and strictly limited due to the high, closely monitored cost of usage that appeared on the quarterly bill like a financial reckoning. The heavy, often dial-operated, black or cream telephone sat centrally in the hall or living room, a shared household resource that belonged to the adults and was loaned to children only under strict supervision and time limits. Children knew instinctively that calls must be brief, essential, and for adult-approved purposes only. No casual chats, no long conversations with friends, and absolutely no frivolous use that would drive up the bill. What sticks most vividly is the fear surrounding the quarterly telephone bill, where even local calls cost a minimum of 2p after 1971, and the audible click of the metered charge that reminded everyone that every second of conversation was costing money the family could barely afford. The telephone wasn't a tool for connection or convenience, it was a source of anxiety, control, and financial surveillance. A device that reinforced the message that children's social needs were secondary to the household budget and parental authority.